van de
in the whole world. Thank you. Peace is the future. In these moments, the title of our Congress seems no more than a wish. Peace is not the reality today. Neither does it seem to be the future, because war has returned. It has returned in Europe between Russia and Ukraine. In the architecture of Middle East has failed in 2 years while persecuted refugees fleeing from northern Iraq. We are going to listen to a voice that speaks about all these things, and I take the chance of greetings Patrick Sacco, who has lived for a long time in northern Iraq and now lives the tragedy of a people of refugees. Syria is prey to a devastating and inhuman war. Sorrowful stories which germinate also from the re-legitimization of the war as a tool, as well as the mixture between religion and violence. Normally, there is a worsening of the very condition of war as they're provided by the Geneva Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners and Wounded, as well as the humanitarian law. War are increasingly more inhuman. We see it in the exhibition of the act of cruelty, which used to be covered up by those who committed them in the past, and now, in this global era, are used as a weapon to slaughter and to exhibit the horror. Women, men, humiliated, driven out of their homes, naked, killed by gunshot or even worse. Children were killed. Journalists. This is true terrorism. It is the worship of violence that terrorizes and conquers. Peace, indeed, does not seem to be the future. Neither it seems in the major cities, especially in the suburbs, where the widespread violence of mafias and crime rules as if it was a civil war. In many countries of the world, I'm thinking of some African countries, the state has not protected citizens who end up in the violent hands of criminal or pseudo-religious groups. We were speaking about it with Cardinal Onayekan, whom I greet as I greet all the guests from Nigeria. I do not conjure these visions to make fear grow. The global world, Professor Bauman authoritatively explained it to us, is a land of many fears. Professor Bauman, he also noted how our generation, though it is gifted with the best technology, is the one that experiences more insecurity and fear. Contemporary men and women feel isolated at the mercy of powers that can attack them from afar. They live what the scholar of religious Mircea Eliade used to call the fear of history. Citizens, whether alone or associated, feel incapable of making history and does not even try to do it. They are powerful. Politics has lost all power. Fear is then not only a feeling, it becomes sometimes contempt for the other who is a different religion or different ethnic group. The culture of contempt is as ancient as human history, but in this time of globalization, its revival is stunning. Fear generates violence. At times, violence is smuggled as preventive. in the face of the other's proposed aggressiveness. My dear friends, we question ourselves on peace and future on these days. We are doing it in Belgium in 100 years from the beginning of the First World War, when this little neutral country was overcome by a conflict born far away from here, showing that war spreads like a contagion in an environment that is already saturated with tension, and turning a European war into a global war. And here I wish to grasp the opportunity to thank our Belgian friends and the authorities of their hospitality, and express my thanks to those who offered their voluntary help for the realization of their meeting. Thank you all to all of you. One very special thought goes with great affection to the Bishop of Antwerp, my dear friend, Monsignor Bonny, with whom we have realized this event, and a thought to the community of Sant'Egidio of Belgium. Pope Francis, a few weeks ago, spoke of contemporary conflicts almost as a third world war, but he said in pieces, in chapters. Against this background, we ask ourselves, is peace our future? Who are we? We come from far. Allow me to recall our path from the first great meeting among religion in Assisi, the City of St. Francis, summoned in 1986 by John Paul II, at the time of the Cold War. We called it the path in the spirit of Assisi. Back then, the great Pope John Paul II said, and I quote, more perhaps than ever before in the history, the intrinsic link between an authentic religious attitude and the great good of peace has become evident to all. End of quote. Religion and peace interpenetrate each other. It was necessary to remove all religious foundation from war and violence, denying religious war all excuses. We continued since 1986, year after year, gathering together women and men of religion, humanists, to work on the delicate border, front line between war and peace. We have done with the conviction that never war is holy, but only peace is holy. We had watched on the front line between war and religion, because dangerous mixes are created, as it was at the end of the 20th century, at the beginning of the 21st, when an interpretation of conflict as war of religion and civilization took root. It was a tremendous simplification facing the complexity of the global world. Simplification that was handy for whoever was seeking for an enemy and did not want to make the effort of understanding the other, as well, a simplification as well for those who wanted to wage war or stand up as an enemy to others or to the world. Wars of religion. Frightened men and women reassured one another, finding an enemy to find. Power-thirsty men and women seek a blessing and legitimization in religion. Along a path that set off in Assisi years after year in 86, we have clarified that peace is much too serious to make it the business of few. Back then, John Paul II said, peace is a workshop open to all, and not just to specialists, to the wise ones and strategists. End of quote. From here comes this movement of peace and dialogue, a movement which has been through, it has involved humanists and people of belief and people of faith, Unfailingly, we were confronted with the objection concerning the conflicts underway, the objection of what is the use of your dialogue? But what would the world be without dialogue? Visiting the community of Sant'Egidio a few months ago, Pope Francis said, the world suffocates without dialogue. I would add, what does prayer achieve? The dialogue between religion and cultures is the answer to live together in worlds that are more and more complex and multifaceted. It is a daily practice, a culture that turns into a proposal. War always leaves the world worse than they found it. If we look back to the past 2 decades, we see that the words on the new global world left a poisoned heritage. I'm not saying it out of pacifism, but by a sound historical awareness of what has happened. Refusal of war, the war leaves the world worse than they found it, because the war destroy man, women, countries, human life. Refusal of war does not originated from generic pacifism, but from the will to be peacemakers, emphasizing, therefore, then the path of dialogue. Yet, facing conflicts, institutional bodies that are in charge for dialogue appear to be worn out, while the culture of practice and dialogue appear to be devaluated to a mere political correctness, to a scheme lacking passion. They are denigrated by the machismo of those who are re-legitimizing war and violence. Religions hold a crucial responsibility. In our world, frightened by the economic crisis, in this world of ours, we need the breath that may reanimate hope, that may drive back hope to humanity, to awareness of a common destiny, because religions say that men and women actually undertake the same journey and they have a common faith. That this is a basic consciousness, as simple as bread and as needed as water. A common shared future destiny in diversity. An anthropologist, Germain Tillon, who was imprisoned in a Nazi lager. All relatives, all different. We are all relatives. But this basic awareness is sometimes lost in the tangle of hatred, vested interest, prevention of culture, fanaticism. We need to revive the workshops of unity, especially by encouraging a simple, essential, uniting drive. All relatives, religions, and cultures can revive this simple and basic awareness. Be simple with intelligence, used to teach the great John Chrysostomus. Simple with intelligence. My thought goes to 2 men of dialogue and religion, who are beloved friends of ours, 2 Christian bishops, Mar Gregorius Ibrahim and Paul Yazigi. Together with them, Paolo Dall'Olio, were held captive for more than a year in Syria. We have no more news of their fate, and I wish to greet them and remember them. And I want to greet among us Patriarch Ephraim of the Syrian Orthodox Church, the head of the Syrian Orthodox Church, that is the Church of Mar Gregorius, a people of believers, poor and defenseless, who over generations have preserved their peace without weapons. Welcome, Your Holiness. Unfortunately, at times, religions feel attracted by the worship of violence, by fanaticism that is inhuman. Religions should not have to go back to their profound energy of peace. And this happens in meeting, in generosity, in cultivating the spiritual dimension of friendship. The strength of this path of the Spirit of Assisi confirms solemnly that no war of violence that can be waged in the name of God. We say it within our own religious tradition, alerting that violence in the name of God is blasphemy. All religious traditions tell us of a patient, merciful, slow to anger, compassionate God. We need, in these days, difficult times, to find the audacity of remembering that peace is the name of God, and finding each and meeting together in this anniversary of the First World War in front of the scenarios of our time empowers us to strongly claim that peace is the name of God. This means to look for peace as the future of our countries. Every religious leader, every believer, beyond their own community, is called to be man and woman of peace. This demands the development of a passion for peace. It asks the growth. It is the growth of a power for peace, able to create new ideas, restoring places of encountering, and defying the fates of war. My dear friends, I greet you all with great joy, but I also feel that this meeting is not only a beautiful meeting, but it is also a need of our time. 30 years passed from 1986, when our path began. Some of us, of course, are becoming old. But our conviction has not faded. On the contrary, it was strengthened. The conviction that war is the great foolishness and that dialogue is the cure for all conflicts. And more than ever, more than before, much more than before, we are today convinced that that peace is a great cause, a cause that can inspire policies as well as personal choices and existences. Yes, peace is an ideal that is trampled upon in many parts of the world, but it must rise again. Peace is the supreme ideal for tired societies that are tired and lacking a cause. Our ideal is that peace is the future.
Grazie